Our next panel is on offshore wind, moderated by George Tsimis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is this working? Can you hear me? There we go. Want to thank HACC NACC for allowing me to moderate this panel. We are now moving on to a different phase of the program. We are now, the theme of this year's conference, as you know, is clean energy in a changing world. And unlike the previous panel where we were talking about fuels for various ships, now we're going on to a whole different class of energy itself, offshore wind. And it is the 30th annual HACC NACC Shipping Conference. So where were we 30 years ago with offshore wind? Doing my deep dive in internet research, I came across the first offshore wind farm was developed in 1991 off the coast of Denmark. It consisted of 12 turbines, generated 5 megawatts of power, powered 2,200 homes. How far have we come? Well, that's what we're going to find out now. So I want to just do a deep dive in this with the panel members and start off a discussion with the current state of offshore wind here in the United States. And Charlie, I'm going to start off with you. Give us a good news, bad news, if you could. I'll leave it to you which one you want to say first, and just let us know where we are with, say, operational wind farms and some of the challenges that we've been facing here in the U.S. in the last few years.
Sure. So the Biden administration came in with very high hopes, very high goals, 30 gigawatts by 2030. That's roughly speaking 2,000 turbines. That's an awful lot of turbines off the U.S. East Coast. The projects are being permitted. Many permits have been issued. Just this past week, the permitting was finished for the biggest project in the United States, 2.6 gigawatts off the coast of Virginia, called CVOW. That's 170 units, I think. That's the good news. The industry is growing, it's proceeding, things are happening, vessels are being built, crew transfer vessels, service operation vessels, a wind turbine installation vessel is being built at down in Texas. A fall pipe vessel is being built in Philadelphia. The bad news is that there's been some financial hiccups. These very long-term infrastructure project has a high risk to it. The permitting process takes upwards of 10 years. You have a single customer. We're going to hear from one of the single customers in a second. So you don't have alternatives for your project once built. And the technology is still changing. The industry has not reached a point of settled processes. The turbines are still increasing in size and so on. So we have had a couple of cancellations. Equinor has canceled a project, and Ørsted has canceled a couple of projects. So that's the good and the bad news.
Thank you, Charlie. Alessandra, you're on this panel, you are from a company that operates within the space, Jones Act operator. Is there anything that you can add to this particular initial discussion?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I think certainly we've come a long way from 30 years ago, but also we're facing lots of challenges. This is a new industry, and we can't expect for everything to go well right away. But there's hope, and I think we're experiencing a reset at this point. There's a recent study by Green Ducklings talking about how projects are all being challenged, and about a third of the projects, installation projects that were supposed to happen by 2030 have been challenged essentially. And 50% of the 2025 and to 2028 installation projections. Also, on the other hand, I was speaking with a representative of ACP, which is American Clean Power, yesterday actually, and she was telling me that the expectation is that we will probably reach half of our goal for 2030 at 14.5 gigawatts. Obviously, we hope that that will be better than that, but anyway, we're at 50%. There's a positive in all of this, which is that now we know what our challenges are. We understand that there are a lot of supply chain issues, there are financing issues, there are interest rate issues, banking issues, and infrastructure issues. There are a lot of issues to cover. And so I think what this does is it allows us to refocus and better plan ahead. And I think that the goal stays alive, but we have to find a way forward from here.
Thank you, Alessandra. And again, there are some positive notes. I mean, we do know that we have operational wind farms, or at least turbines. One turbine that
Well, we have two half-finished.
right? And
We had one
and South Fork, exactly. And the South Fork turbines, my understanding, are 5 megawatts, giving power 5 megawatts. So you can ask yourself, 3 or 4 years have passed, and we're at the same level that Denmark was in 1991.
Right, and also let's not forget another positive, right?
Positive. I don't want to say that in a negative way. It's just you got to start somewhere.
Right, and let's not forget, and I'm sure Commissioner Burman here can talk a lot more about this, but the New York Bight was very successful. There's a lot of interest from developers. I think the bidders for those seabed leases we're going to pay around the order of $5.3 billion. That's a lot of money, and that's going to move the economy. As well as New Jersey, right? With all those challenges that they've had, they've managed to approve 2 projects recently, and that's going to power millions of homes. So it's not all a challenge. We have some good wins
And
there.
you set the table now for me to introduce Commissioner Burman. I think you're the first state representative we've had at the conference. I could be wrong though, but welcome, Commissioner Burman. And perhaps you could explain for us and just give us a quick rundown as to what you do as a commissioner at the New York Public Service Commission and how it relates to these offshore wind projects.
Thank you. So just as a disclaimer, I'm sharing with you my own personal thoughts. I don't have inside knowledge in winners and losers for any solicitation, and anything that I say is really just my personal thoughts, but that decisions are made based on the record and not based on just my, sort of talking now. The gentleman who just sat in the seat before me in the seat, is he still here? So you said that regulators don't know anything about shipping. You're totally right. And it is interesting because I think that there is a disconnect between the regulators, both at the federal level and the state level, and sort of on the ground stuff. We don't generally see shippers coming in to our regulatory proceedings and talking about the different challenges. And what we do see is we see offshore wind developers and others who, communities, et cetera, with their particular positions. But it is not necessarily a full sort of analysis and understanding, and we're focused pretty much at the front end in the announcements, right? The projects, the targets, et cetera. And really, if you're going to be successful, it's, as you know, it's not just the press release announcing you were the winning bidder, it's all of the things that come along the way, and then the things that can derail it. And how you get back on track is really important. And for me, I've been on the commission since, so I've been a public servant for nearly 28 years, 10 of them as a commissioner. I'm in my 11th year. And right before that, I worked as the chief counsel to the New York State Senate. And before that, I was a staffer at the commission. And then I had a couple other jobs before that. So I come at this from an economic regulatory perspective and kind of looking at what is it that we do. And the challenge and goal of almost every state energy policy, New York, New Jersey, kind of looking at that landscape, is to balance reliability, environmental sustainability, and the cost of energy supply to meet the needs and demands of consumers and to support the growth of our state's economy. Most states now have targets. You have the federal targets of different things, and then you have the state sort of targets. And it really is about who can be bigger and better. And that really is something for me as a regulator that I'm really cognizant of, that it's not about, I think it's great to have sort of level setting in goals to reach. But it is important to look at what are we really trying to accomplish, how are we going to accomplish it, and how are we going to reset and pivot when we need to in a way that's helpful. So 2 years ago, I had brain surgery. And my anniversary was November 4th of this year, and I ran the New York City Marathon. So that was sort of and if anyone knows me at that, they would be like, oh, she totally can't. Like, she can't run 500 feet, and like, she won't even like play tennis because if it doesn't come right to you, I'm not hitting it back, right? But for me, it was important to sort of look at something that I can do, and I took a lot of lessons from how to do that in the preparation, in the need to be prepared, in the resources that you need, in sort of the team that you needed to work with to help you, and the mental and the physical challenges. And I really feel like there's a lot of lessons there. Now, I will tell you that out of however many people there were that ran the New York City Marathon, I beat 232 of them. So how I define success is very different than really an elite athlete. But I say this because I do think that as we look at our goals for offshore wind in particular, you can't look at it as just the goals for offshore wind. You got to look at it as the goals as it relates to the transmission, the goal as it relates to the supply chain, the goal as it relates to the environmental issues, the goal as it relates to what are you going to do once you are trying to build it out, how do you get the ports ready, how do you deal with the folks who are saying, well, how much of this navigable water is going to be taken up, how are we going to deal with the repair issues, how are we going to deal with the fact that our targets and our goals and all of this is not even understanding that the technology that we need for so much of this isn't even ready, it isn't even thought of, and there's so much innovation that's going to happen. Now, I think I'm going to, the other thing is, I will say I talk a lot, so you do have to just yank me. So we'll come back to a lot of the issues.
I'm not going to yank you. You've touched on a lot of issues that we're going to be hitting in a few minutes. But one thing I wanted to ask you as a follow-up, Commissioner Burman, is Charlie already mentioned that you had these withdrawals from existing projects in New Jersey, and Empire Wind 2 with Equinor was the more recent one and more relevant to your jurisdiction. Can you explain for us what the process going forward is going to be where these projects have a future and it's not just, oh, they've withdrawn and now it's dead and nothing is going to happen? Can you
Yeah, so we've had a lot of different fits and starts, and I think there's also October of 2023, the commission, or the New York Commission, voted 7-0 to deny offshore wind developers and also large-scale renewable developers who had won bids through our NYSERDA, our Energy Research and Development Authority. They came in, they petitioned us to say, listen, inflation issues, supply chain issues, permitting issues, all of them, I think, legitimate issues, and they came in and said, we need more money because it's not doable for us to do this. And if there's anything that my takeaway is, I feel like the best thing that anyone could do to fully understand the landscape of New York is to go, it's all on video, to go back at that October session and watch it from start to finish on the item with offshore wind. Now, why do I say that? Because I spoke for 43 minutes. But I will say that every commissioner spoke, which is actually pretty unusual. And it was a significant issue with people very unhappy that we denied the petitions. And the reason we denied the petitions, instead of sharing all 43 minutes of what I said, really was a combination of if we were to, after bids were won, to now rejigger that, it would not just affect offshore wind procurement, it would affect sort of the certainty and the transparency and the feeling that things really were being done in a regulatory, proper, prudent way. And we would have taken that, we would have ripped that Band-Aid off. And therefore, we would, for us, felt that it was really improper for us to, after the fact, while they were there were other avenues, if you win a bid, to deal with it if you realize that there are, you can't meet the expectations. And for us, as a whole, I think there were a lot of very angry people. And I'm used to, I've been on the commission for, I'm in my 11th year, I'm used to angry people. But what I realized was that we also were not necessarily taking advantage of what I saw as where were we in understanding that there were these challenges. There's the Jones Act challenges, there's supply chain challenges, there's the fact that you won the bid, you won that contract years ago, and you're now trying to deal with this. And that's on us, right? That's on us in not really helping to set some realistic expectations. Part of the challenge after our decision was, I think, a knee-jerk challenge because we are very much focused on trying to have a viable offshore wind industry in New York and New Jersey and others. Part of the challenge was, I think, that instead of taking the time to think through, all right, what is it that we might need to do to reset, not just offshore wind, but perhaps other things, the transmission issue is going to be a huge issue. It was literally within days of that decision, Governor rightfully, put out a 10-point plan to try to sort of calm folks. NYSERDA put out another bid and dealt with that. The bid is, the fourth solicitation is still out there. People have bid into it. And so what we saw was really sort of the next step. What we missed, the steps that we missed, was taking time to think about how are we working to make sure that we're truly going to accomplish what we need to do, or are we just going to be back into the same situation? And frankly, the issue is the ratepayers, which we're stewards of the ratepayer money, are bearing a huge brunt of this, and the risks are really pretty staggering. So it's something to consider.
Thank you, Commissioner Burman. And you've set the table for the next topic, although I think that they're inextricably intertwined, financing considerations and supply chain. And I'm going to ask both Charlie and Alessandra to chime in. Let's start off with just financing. We heard the finance panel before talk about how they didn't have an appetite for investing in offshore wind. Perhaps you can just give us what you're experiencing with your clients, Charlie, and then Alessandra as an operator. What are the challenges you're seeing from the finance standpoint?
Sure. Well, I'll speak to vessels. I won't speak to developers and their project overall financing. So most of the vessels have to be built to spec. That's your first problem with financing. In other words, you're not getting term contracts for, long-term contracts for any vessels except what they call the SOVs, the service operation vessels. Now, these are substantial vessels. A U.S. SOV, you probably know the price better than I, current price, 140?
I think a little more now.
Okay, 180.
Yeah.
100, you're talking about a substantial vessel. They might get a 10-year contract. The crew transfer vessels, the 10 to $12 million vessels might get 18 months, maybe renewable for another 12. So you're basically still going on spec. The wind turbine installation vessel, the one that's being built, is being built by a developer, Dominion, so it has its own project to work on, but after that, it has no business. The rock dumper, same, working on Empire One, then no business. So the vessels are basically having to be built on balance sheet, and eventually the industry may grow to the point where you have 100 or 150 or 200 CTVs and 10, 12, 15, 20 SOVs, and there might be a spot market for CTVs and so on, but that's in the future.
Alessandra, anything to add?
Yeah, so for us, as a Jones Act vessel operator, obviously financial resources are top of mind. These vessels, like Charlie said, are extremely expensive. Obviously, SOVs much more than CTVs, and they're only growing in price. I, for instance, requoted some of them, and in the period between June of last year to about December, all of the costs had gone up about 25%. So you're talking about real high increases. It's not just a little bit. Obviously, the biggest hurdle that we face is access to financing. And I think that the first step for a Jones Act operator is to obtain access to financing in order to be able to build these vessels, right? So what happens is with the uncertainty in the market, it makes lenders very nervous for various reasons, including conversations on the Jones Act or whatever else it may be, and as well as lenders don't want to lend money unless there is a steady charter to support the money that they're lending, right? So this leads us to the conversation about long-term charters, as you mentioned, Charlie, as well. Long-term charters are essential for our access to finance. And so if we are not able to get those, then we are handicapped in the sense that we can't access the money to build the boat. And if we can't build the boat, then the project is going to inevitably be delayed. So some concerns in respect of contracts right now are obviously project cancellations are top of mind. And the issue here is the vessel owner is putting out a lot of money to build a boat, and then the project gets canceled. So what do we do with this half-built boat, right? So we need some safeguards in the contract, and of course this is all a matter of negotiation, but the safeguards have to be either termination payments, right? So pre and post delivery, depending on when the project gets canceled, to at least cover the cost of what the money that we've put out. And the other very interesting thing, I'm looking at Leanne over there, I see some friends from the insurance world here, and I have a question for you guys, which is, I assume that another avenue or strategy would be insurance, right? So if you don't get that termination payment, then maybe we should be looking at insurance, ensuring the possibility of cancellation. Obviously, the drawback of that is that insurance is very expensive, right? So then it draws down, up your price and your chances of winning as well. So it's very complicated, and it's like a domino effect, and it all ends up in pricing that ultimately is what you win or lose on. So just one more thing, and it is,
Alessandra, you're the moderator now, apparently.
oh,
Can I add something to that, George?
just another one that's really important is the residual value risk of the vessel, right? So if you have this very expensive vessel, and then all of a sudden your contract ends, well, what do you do with that boat? Where do you put it to work? And what is it worth now? Is it worth, what's the worth of it if you can't put it to work? Thank you.
Can
I just wanted to touch upon, I think that some of the elephants in the room is that when we first started with offshore wind targets and renewable targets, but offshore wind, there was a focus that cost was going to go down, prices were going to go down. And it seems to be forgotten that one of the reasons we kind of looked at, and we're going to increase our targets even more. We went from 2030 targets to 2035, and it just kept getting, just the way, you kept hearing about everybody talking about bigger and bigger turbines without necessarily, like, at some point you have to say, stop, we got to figure this out, right? So I do think that it does come back to, if we are looking at that costs and price are not going to go down, or at least we can't predict it, how do we deal with that while we're also looking at the other things? And I think too many times we look at this as siloed, and I do feel like it is needing to be more collaborative, more innovative, not just about big turbines, but about what we have now, and how can we really help folks, especially the regulator, understand some of the challenges, like the Jones Act. I forget, when I first, we always hear about the Jones Act. As I found it interesting today, because I always heard it as it was the camp of the yes, keep the Jones Act, and the camp of no, right? There is this sort of discussion that I think needs to happen much more timely, talking about what is it, because we're now interpreting the Jones Act on new things as well. We're interpreting different waivers, different ways of looking at it, different ways of what applies to it. I feel like it would be a really helpful conversation to get some more level setting and frameworks about Jones Act, what that looks like, and how it actually works, so that folks can make some determinations about whether you need to make some changes, or with what you have, keep and figure out some other things. And I just think that would be a helpful conversation, but it is probably the most important thing that people need to really get a handle on and stay on the right side of that.
Thank you.
George, do you know anybody that knows anything about the Jones Act?
So, Mr. Papavizas is writing a book about the Jones Act. So
Written, not
has
writing.
written a book about the Jones Act. This isn't the book signing promo tour, but now we get to hear from Charlie about that. And finish on what you wanted to.
No, what I was going to say before is, I think it tells you a lot that all the expensive vessels, the SOVs and the other two, have applied for U.S. government Title 11 financing. All of them are hoping to bail out their financing difficulties with U.S. government financing. I've been dealing with the Jones Act for basically my entire professional life, and with offshore wind since 2010. And yes, there's been a lot of issues, but the industry has accommodated to those issues, and has for some time. There are lots of things foreign vessels can do, and there are some things that foreign vessels cannot do. And there are some things that U.S. flag vessels must do, like crew transfer. So I don't think the Jones Act is really a significant issue for the industry, at least today. Maybe it used to be.
Well, we're running out of time, and we do want to get to some questions. But before we do that, I want to ask a question for everybody on the panel. 1 minute response. And the question is really simple. I mean, we've had a very challenging last 6 months. There's been a lot of press, a lot of negative press, or not as positive press. Where do you see 24 going, given what we've experienced in 2023? And do you see it being more positive? Do you see it being more negative? Do you see it being just status quo? How do you view the next year? Charlie, we'll start with you. Just work down the table.
I'm still very optimistic about the industry. Our clients are still installing South Fork and Vineyard, and are going to be starting on Seaval pretty soon. There's vessels working. There will be vessels working. And the news from New Jersey with the 2 approvals is positive, and there'll be more of that. So I'm very optimistic, and I think 2024 will have a lot of things for people to do.
Alessandra?
Only 1 minute?
Only 1 minute.
Okay, I'll be quick. So I think 2024 is the year of hope, right? And try to get this done. U.S. vessel operators are ready and willing to build these boats. McAllister hasn't gotten a long-term contract yet. I'm still waiting for one, hopefully soon. So we haven't been able to finance a vessel, a new-built vessel yet, but we hope to. And instead, what we've done is we have gotten ready to with support vessels. We have gone to the Gulf of Mexico and purchased 2 crew boats, which are available in Providence, Rhode Island, and home ported there, and have worked for Vineyard Wind already. And so we are providing support vessels on the spot market, and I think that there are currently like 40 vessels under construction right now, according to ACP, and more to come. Hopefully, there is a need for 25 different vessel types per project, and so we have a long way to go, but we're on the right track.
Thank you, Alessandra. Commissioner Burman?
I am hopeful. I will say that I think that part of the challenge is discussing in real time the elephants in the room and collaborating on ways to redefine success and work in sort of the long-term, the short and the long-term strategy. And that means really not just looking at things in isolation, but how it pairs with other things. And there are so many different entities and folks that need to be involved in helping figure all that out. But we need to really make sure we're being much more holistic in doing that.
Thank you. We have time, I would guess, for one question. Anybody in the audience have a question for the panel? Peter.
What's the driver financially? I mean, I assume that we want to put, the reason for putting them offshore is because of the strength and reliability of the wind driving them. But has there been an analysis, a financial analysis, that says across the life expectancy of it, what's the benefit of X size turbine out at sea compared to same turbine on land?
Charlie, you want to take that?
Yeah, well, you can obviously build much bigger, therefore much more efficient offshore. The wind take is much more efficient. You just can't do that on land. And the Northeast has coal power plants that have to be replaced or are in the process of being replaced. What are we going to replace them with? A new natural gas pipeline? Where's that going to go? So there's a besides the renewable energy component, which is important, there is an economic case to be made for these power plants.
Yeah, no, I also just wanted to add that turbines have been growing in size, and there's more power coming out of them. Technology has been advancing. We also, like Commissioner Burman was saying, we have to plan for this, because while there are ports in the U.S. that can accommodate that, they're not quite enough, and even those that can need work. And so port infrastructure is another thing that needs to be top of mind in order to accommodate these new technologies.
I have like 11 different things that I think shippers need to know about New York, but I'm not going to be able to get them out, so we'll have to have another discussion. I will say, I just want to say, I don't think that talking about where's natural gas pipeline going to go in the Northeast, I understand the challenges, but I do think we do need to talk about how do we pair some things and figure out what may need to work, because I don't think that we can put all our eggs in one basket. And really, we have to remember that, my job as a regulator is to understand the nature of the vulnerabilities and overall risks in the transition, And we have to move forward with our decarbonization, recognizing that we cannot lose sight of reliability and resiliency of the grid, and we have to do so with costs in mind. And if we forget that, we're going to lose the trust of folks, and we're going to go backwards, not forwards.
Okay, everybody, that's all the time we have. Thank you for your attention, and let's have a round of applause for the panel members. Thank you.